This is TWiT.
Hey, have y'all checked out Club TWiT? This is our members-only ad-free podcast service with the bonus TWiT Plus feed. Join Club TWiT for just $7 a month and you'll get access to our exclusive members-only Discord channel as well. Head on over to twit.tv/clubtwit and join today. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Pruitt, and this is Hands-On Photography here on TWiT TV. I hope y'all are doing well. I am unbelievable as always. And on today's episode, we're going to do part 2 of a previous episode where I talked about creating eye-popping portrait photography. This isn't something that you're going to do in camera, even though you should always start in camera with getting your shots right. This is going to be more on the post-processing side, but this is just another bit of an iteration off of that previous episode, episode 74. If this is your first time joining, I want to say welcome to you and say thank you for joining the show and checking out Hands-On Photography. We're available on all of the podcast applications out there, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just go to our website, twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP. for Hands-On Photography, and you'll see all of our subscription options over there. And if you're subscribing over on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, please leave me a star rating and also leave me a comment there so Apple will push us up in the discovery algorithm so other folks can check out the show. All right, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started with this week's episode. So again, this is part 2 of our eye-popping portrait discussion here on Hop. And in the previous episode, we took a look at a model that had some blue eyes, and I just showed you how to really use selective adjustments in your post-processing to really bring out the life in those blue eyes of the model. And it was a lot of fun and yet a bit scary for me at the same time, but I'm not going to go there. What I want to do now is let's just go ahead and hop on into Lightroom and get started on this week's portrait. Okay, so we are in Lightroom, and let me move my camera out of the way just for a touch. There we go. That's better. All right, so we're in Lightroom now. And as I said before, we worked on an image with the model that had blue eyes. And this is an awesome stock image that I got from Creative Commons. And it really does just work to be able to play around and enhance and bring her eyes out because of the, brilliant blue color that she has there. So let's go back to this week's image. Well, y'all know who that is. That'd be old Queen Pruitt there. And we're looking at her. She doesn't have blue eyes. So I know the question is, okay, well, Aunt, how are you going to make her eyes stand out? She doesn't have blue eyes. She doesn't have red eyes. She doesn't have green eyes. Nope, she doesn't. She has dark brown eyes. And if I wanted to enhance that, I guess I could make that brown even more brown. No, that's not going to work. And then it'll just look like she just has black eyes. We don't want that. We really want to just bring her eyes out and just give more life. And it's going to be similar to the technique that we did on the previous episode, but just slightly different. It's a whole different concept this time. So what I want to do is just fire up Lightroom and use the adjustment brush that's built into this tool that allows me to do selective adjustments. And with that said, I'm also going to be using a Wacom tablet, my good old Wacom Intuos, inexpensive post-processing device. I highly recommend them. And actually, we'll put an affiliate link in these show notes just in case you're curious to check one out for yourself. Highly recommend these. All right, so let's go ahead and get rolling. I'm going to hit K on the keyboard and open up the adjustment brush here inside of Lightroom. And then I'm going to also, let's zoom in a little bit. Zoom in a little bit to see what we're working with. All right, so now when you're doing fine detail work, it's best to just zoom in so you can really push those pixels around. You get a better look at them. Oh, you know what? Wait a minute. I forgot something. Before we even touch this, so let me turn this adjustment brush off. We're going to go down here to this bottom of Lightroom where the photos are. We're going to create a virtual copy. And I'm only going to do that just for the convenience of this show. That way we'll have a really quick and easy view of doing a before and after. And this is pretty much the same file. We're just going to work on top of the virtual copy down here, not the original one. Okay, back to the adjustment brush. So K on our keyboard, and we got our adjustment brush fired up. If we look at the effects options here, this effect says exposure. And if you click on the drop down box, you got a whole bunch of different options in there. And quite frankly, for this tutorial, it doesn't matter which one you pick on because we're going to touch on pretty much all of these options. So we're just going to go ahead and start with exposure because it's just a good starting point for this particular effect. So I have the exposure slider already set to 1 extra stop of exposure on this preset. And the next thing to take a look at is your brush properties down here at the bottom. You have the size of the feather, you have the flow, and the density. Okay, so far as the feather goes, make sure that feather is set to 100% because that gives your brush a soft edge. And far as the flow, do not use 100% on the flow. You're going to get a much more analog and more natural feel with your adjustment if the flow is set to roughly 80% or somewhere in that area. And the same goes for the density. Back the density off as well. You don't necessarily have to go as low as 80, but something that's not quite 100% is definitely going to be more beneficial and more of a natural feel as you're brushing along on the image. So we got that set. So let's go ahead and drop our little adjustment brush pin right here next to our eyes. And this brush size is a little bit too big. So we're going to use our bracket key, the left bracket key, to shrink the brush down. Okay. And actually, I think I want to zoom in a little bit more. So I'll just do Control plus on my keyboard. A little bit more. There we go. All right. So we're nice and close and intimate here. And I'm going to take this brush and just brush the bottom portion of her iris here and just brush across it nice and neat as best I can. And the more I stroke across it, the more I'm laying down the actual effect from this adjustment brush. Okay. So we got that done. And right now, if you look at it, you could barely see that it, since we gave it a 1 extra stop of exposure, we have just a little bit of light starting to pop on the bottom of her iris here. So next, let's go ahead and take a look at these other sliders here. We have the shadows. Let's push that up. We have the whites. Push that up just a little. And the black levels, we're going to increase the black level as well. And when I say increase the black levels, that could be a little bit confusing because if you say increase the black levels, one may think that you was trying to say make it darker. Now, if you decrease the black levels, that's going to make it darker. So if I take this down all the way to -100, it totally blackens out the spot that we brushed in. We don't want that. We want to make a little bit more light here at the bottom. Okay. So before I continue, I want to explain the logic of this effect that we're going to create here. See, if you look at her eye right there in the left portion of her eye, you'll see this little catch light reflection. And that catch light comes from the way that I had the light set up in the studio for this shot. It's very common. Even if you look right here at me on the screen, you see that I have catch lights in my eyes because I have this huge 36-inch key light right here in front of me. And catch lights are great for portraits because it automatically says that model is alive. There's a little bit of a glisten and sheen and shine to their eyes, and it just says you're alive, basically. But if you think about it, that light is coming through, and yes, it's reflecting, giving a nice little reflection right there on your eyeball, but that light is continuing to pass through the spherical shape of your eye. So if you take a look at it closely, if you were to look, get real close to someone's eyeball, I don't recommend you doing this right now during COVID, but if you get really close to someone's eyeball, you'll be able to see light come through the top and escape through the bottom portion of the sphere. And what this effect is going to do is just enhance that path of light going through the eyes, really just bringing out more life and actually allowing you to see more detail with the eyes, especially when you're dealing with eyes that are of a darker color, like what we're working here with Queen Pruitt. Okay, so now let's go back and take a look in Lightroom. All right, so you see that I have this sort of a, you know, grayish, lighter look of the eye. And yes, that looks really, really bad right now. But trust me, it's a process. It's going to take a little bit of work here. And quite frankly, what I like to do is overdo it just a touch, especially for a tutorial purposes, because YouTube and whatever podcast application you're enjoying this on makes it hard to see fine details. So I have to overdo it a little bit so you can get the drift of the effect. So I'm going to brush it in a little bit more. And then I'll go over here and take a look at all of these sliders again and just see what works best. So we're going to push the exposure up some more. I'm going to push it almost all the way to the top to almost 3 stops. So let's stop right about there. Then push the highlights up some more. Let's get in there. And we're already at the black level, so that's good to go. But unfortunately, we're going to have a little bit of grain and noise right there. So let's smooth that out and get rid of that grain, because it doesn't look really good. And granted, we are zoomed in at, you know, almost 200% on this. So you are going to be able to see those really nasty, gritty pixels in there if you zoom in that close. There's nothing wrong with the image, but that's just part of the zoom in and the pixel peeping. But I'm going to smooth it out just a touch by sliding this noise slider up just a little bit. That smooths it out. And now we're going to give it some detail by sharpening things up just a little bit. So you can adjust that with your sharpness slider, clarity slider, and what I really like to mess with is the texture slider. That's like the perfectly fine tuning of sharpness. So I'm going to push the sharpness up a little, push the clarity up a little bit, but not too much, because you notice if I push too much, that grain starts to get sharpened up. We don't want that. So be careful with that. And then get the texture, because that texture is more of a high frequency sharpening standpoint. And we'll push that noise slider up a little bit more. Okay, looking good. So now take our brush and we can continue to brush on this even more and just really try to fine tune it and make this shine the way we want it to shine. Like so. Very good. All right. So now I'm going to zoom out on this back to a normal view, and it's probably going to look weird to you. And yes, it does. It almost looks like she has a glass eye. We don't want a glass eye, but this is pretty close to the look that we want. So I'm going to zoom back in, and we're going to fine tune this a little bit, because I think I went a little bit too far. I don't want her pupil to get this effect. I just want the iris to get the effect. And so if you ever are wondering just how much you brushed over in your adjustment options there, hit O on your keyboard and you can see exactly with this red mask where you brushed. And if you feel like you brushed too much in a certain spot, just erase it. You do that by holding down the Alt or Option key on your keyboard and brushing away. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger on the eraser size. So I'm just brushing away like so. Make sure I get it off of her eyelid, because that doesn't matter. We don't want it on the eyelid. We're worried about the iris. So brush away there, erase it from there, erase it from the pupil. Like that, roughly like that. And you can really, you know, just dive in and fine tune this to your heart's content. So I'm just brushing away. Somehow I brushed all the way down here. That's bizarre. Looking better. Now I'm going to add a little bit more right about there. And I'm going to continue to brush over this first layer here. Just laying it on thick, if you will. Something like that. So now I'm going to hit O to take that away. And we got a pretty light eye here. So now we got our extreme look. So let's dial it back a little bit to make it a little bit more tasteful. Okay, so let's zoom out a touch. I zoomed in. Come on, Ant, get it together. So we'll zoom out a touch. And then we're going to take that exposure slider, push it down just a little bit. Okay. And that's starting to look better already. But again, I see something that's been overdone. So I'm going to zoom in again and make an adjustment on what I think has been overdone, which is this left part of the iris. So I'm going to hold down Alt again, and I'm just going to erase where it was overdone. And I can just tap a little bit like that, and then just add back what I think works best for those areas. So it's a bit of a, experiment, if you will, just trying to fine tune it. And again, if you want to play around with the flow and density, all of that's going to make a difference. So let's dial the density back, dial the flow back, and I'm going to erase again. And I will brush in just ever so gently where I think it needs to be. Just take your time. There's no need to rush. Just brush it in and really bring out those details. And if you go too far, do the same thing with your eraser. Check the flow, check the density, check the feather. Now we're going to erase away just a little bit like that. So now let's back out and take a look. And that is so much better right there. And I even overdid it a little bit. Okay, so let's turn off our adjustment brush here so we don't have that little icon on the screen. Now this is the before looking at our eye, and this is the after looking at our eye. So I'm going to go back in and do her other eye the same way. So I'm going to hit K again on the adjustment brush, and I can just tap on the first one that we were working on and just do the same thing for the other eye. So but I see something wrong here. I'm going to erase this extra right there on the eye. There we go. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the other eye. Just brush in a little bit on the bottom portion of the iris. Just a little bit. I think I went too far right here on the right. So I'm going to erase right about there. There we go. Looking much better. So now let's back out. Uh-oh, I erased across her nose there. Whoops. We will tell her that didn't happen. Right? Just say, yeah, he didn't totally make an eraser mark right across her face. There we go. All right, so now let's back out and take a look-see. Turn off the adjustment brush. Okay, so let's take a look at the before. That's the before. Very good. And now that's the after. Very, very nice. Before and after. Much more life, it's not overdone. I mean, I could even dial this back just a touch more if I needed to, but you get the gist. That's the thing. It's just basically taking someone that has darker eyes and just really allowing the natural light that's in your scene to really bring out some life and character in the eye. It's pretty simple to do. You can do this inside of Lightroom. You can do this inside of Capture One. Any type of photo editor that you're using that allows you to do selective adjustments, you can do this on your images too. All right. Okay, folks, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the show. Hey, make sure you subscribe and make sure you're sharing the show out, and just keep spreading the word. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, feel free to shoot me a message via email. That's hop@twit.tv. Again, that's hop@twit.tv. I do have a feedback show coming up soon, going through some of your emails and sharing it with all of our listeners out there. And also, Do not forget to check out Club TWiT. That's twit.tv/clubtwit. Check us out over there and you get access to some other awesome content and even access to our Discord server and hang out with me and the other hosts and the rest of the TWiT family. All right, folks, thank you all again for the support, and I will catch you next time here on Hands On Photography. Now, you all safely create and dominate, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you are interested in checking out all things smart home and Internet of Things, then you should check out Smart Tech Today, the podcast I, Micah Sargent, do with my co-host Matthew Casanelli. It's all about the smart home and improving your automations.